Hey guys, welcome. Steve Dempster here, Dempster Guitar Studio, and wanted to chat a little bit about two chords that have, I think, traditionally given students a bit of grief, more so than some other basic chords that they've been playing a lot more frequently. Excuse me. One of them is the chord called B7, which, of course, technically, it's referred to as B dominant 7, and with a little study of music theory and all the stuff that guitarists tend not to want to do, you'd understand why it's called dominant. We're not going to get into that today. And then the other beast is the B minor chord, but in a bar chord form. And so there's features about each of these chords that I want to go over and kind of tease apart a bit and give you some strategies to help get comfortable with these particular two chords because they show up in a lot of music. So let's go to the guitar and we'll deal with that rather right now. Okay, here we are back at the trusty fretboard, and we're going to tease apart a little bit of the B7 chord. First off, let me kind of walk you through the fingering of it first, just so you know what we're dealing with. But of course, in the information associated with this video, I've got these written out for you as well. B7, B note on the 5th string 2nd fret. I'm using my second finger to do that. D sharp on the 4th string, 4th fret. There I am, wiggling it away. The 3rd finger sits on the G string at the 2nd fret, and then pinky, little old pinky, sits on the 1st string. I can angle that a bit better for you. Sits on the 1st string, 2nd fret. That's an F sharp. So we have B, D sharp, A, another B, and a D sharp. Not hitting the 6th string. It's out of the equation right now. So we have B, D sharp, A, B again, and a D sharp. All those together form a B7 chord. Now I remember the first time that I was taught that shape. It probably won't make you feel good to know that it really felt good to me when I made that form. Excuse me. But a lot of people have trouble with it because it's an unfamiliar form for most recreational players who are predominantly playing, keys of C and keys of G and D and A that don't necessarily contain this particular chord. And so when it comes time to playing some pieces that have it in it, they struggle with it. And I think most of the struggle predominantly resides around, well, two things. One is that all fingers are being used, and they've got to all come in like any other chord and take on this very sort of alien shape for a little while until, of course, you get used to it. So that's one feature. The other is just that it engages the pinky very prominently, the very top string, giving the pinky a lot of importance. And so the trouble, of course, will typically be that, getting that pinky down in time causes a lot of grief. So, of course, you know me, I'm a big proponent of making sure people kind of identify a weakness in their playing and then spend time working on it. Don't avoid it. You're going to move forward and you're going to get better at things. So, as opposed to just playing the same old stuff that you always play. So let's take a quick look at this guy. I think traditionally people will, by and large, move or rather build the chord with the strong fingers. The 1st and 2nd fingers will typically go down pretty quickly. They may get the 3rd finger in place pretty quickly after that, but almost always I see that the pinky, if I get it out of the way, there's where it is coming down last. It's not a major problem, but I think it contributes to a sense that the chord feels very unnatural and very uncomfortable. So my strategy for you to help with that, and it's a bit of a violation, the first strategy that I have, is to actually have you build the chord from the pinky. Once that guy's in place, you can probably locate the more strong fingers, as many people speak about, pretty quickly. I say that because although people perceive the pinky as weak, you know, there's this big hunk of muscle attached to it in the palm. And that's the muscle that people use to karate chop cinder blocks. I mean, it's got to have some stability to it based on that muscle, but it is a smaller finger, it's skinnier, it's not used as much by a lot of people, so they perceive it to be weak, when in fact it's quite a strong beast. I even bend, you know, with my pinky supported by the other fingers. That's just feels good to me. So, you know, at least getting the pinky down first and then building the rest of the chord would be a good first start. But I like to go a little step further and push it and suggest to you, of course, when you go to strum that chord, that you need to hit the bass strings first, typically, as the motion of strumming takes place. You're going to be coming down this way. So you got to have these guys in place anyway before the pinky has to be in place. Ideally, it's all coming down at once, of course. So to help with that, what I would get you to actually do is train the hand to come in with the pinky and the second finger at the same time. You can see that pretty clearly there. Okay, pinky's right here. Second finger, not so much up against the fret in my case. It seems to be landing in the center. Okay. The other guys, 1 and 3, can come down a little later on, once you get them and once you get the first two in place. But that's a good strategy to give your hand an overall feel for the sort of the genesis of the chord. Get this in place and then throw the other guys down when the time is right. Now that's a good starting point for a B7 formation. So use that strategy to help you get more comfortable with B7 and stop avoiding it just because, well, it's officially and originally a tricky chord to play. Cool. Well, let's take a look now at the B-Minor chord, the other stickler for people. It's a beautiful chord. You can do there's so much that's pretty about that sound that it's a shame that people will tend to avoid it, or any bar chord for that matter, because it's a bar chord. They're tough. Yeah, they are. In fact, challenging to do. And I mentioned this again in the literature. I suggest to you that part of the reason why these sort of structures with the bar finger taking place, why they're so tough, is that when a finger is pressing across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strings, whatever the case may be, it's spreading its force that it's applying on the strings over a wide area, versus a single finger pushing on a single string in a single fret. That's very focused. So the forces are much more spread out, which opens up a whole can of worms for sounds like very incomplete things. So there's a level of adaptation that has to go on. There may be a level of strength development a wee bit that has to go on. But I think one of the first factors that you need to contend with this chord is actually not dealing with those guys at all for the time being. Just focusing on this, and watch carefully. That. Okay. Now you may not be able to tell right away from the angle, but I'm basically midway in the fretboard. And if you were to tell me where my thumb is situated in relation to this bar, there it is. You know, somewhere perhaps between the first and second finger is where that beast is going to land. Where you don't want this thumb to be is like that. Okay, it looks okay out here, but you have this palmy thing happening back here. That's not good. primarily because look at the angle of the fingers now. Watch what happens to those fingers as I correct my thumb. They kind of stand right up. And this is where you get most of your force. As soon as your thumb goes kind of like that, with the palm of the hand pushing against the fretboard, you're already losing strength because the fingers are coming in at an unusual angle, and they lose strength as a result. So I'm going to suggest to you that one of the first things you should start looking at is where your thumb is. Certainly, if it comes up over the top of the fretboard, that's a killer. Look at the hand changing its shape. You can barely form the chord properly, let alone make a bar, when your thumb is coming over like that. So once again, pull that sucker down and make the chord. The result of pulling it down should actually give you a bit of space, I don't know if you can see that very well, under the fretboard. The palm shouldn't be up against the bottom of the fretboard like that. That also makes the chord virtually impossible to make because it distorts the ability of the bar to do its job. So you must let it hang a wee bit from the strings. And that brings me to another point. This hanging feature, it's very subtle, but it's a hanging feature, is one where the arm, the weight of the arm and gravity, essentially, are pulling down on the strings ever so slightly, and that allows a little bit of contribution to your hand being able to press the strings down in place, versus winging your arm out this way or tucking it in artificially that way. Just let it hang the way it wants to, and you'd be surprised at how more naturally the string sound tends to come out. So we've got correct placement for thumb. By the way, never a bent thumb. I know I talk to many people about this. Never that, behind the fretboard. Let it relax. Let it do its job properly. So letting the hand hang is important, just under the natural act of gravity and its own weight. Fingertips are on the strings. That tends to help push the strings into the fretboard, and then with your own hand mechanism pushing the strings. Those two things together tend to clarify the chord a little bit. Okay, so still you may not have good clarification. Very frustrating. And people will walk around and they'll rub their hand and rub their forearm because they're putting a lot of squeeze onto this thing, because they believe that the source of the strength for making this resides in the forearm. And it does to a certain extent. But I want to demonstrate how partially wrong that actually is. Right now, I'm already making the bar chord. Now if I show you the angle here a little bit, look at my thumb, it's not even touching. How's that possible? Not even using my thumb. Well, the truth of the matter is that there's another approach that I think a lot of players are not sensitive to when it comes to learning how to make bar chords, and it's simply this. My body, my torso, more or less in the middle of the guitar, right about here. Okay? My strumming hand is at the back, at the back of the guitar, and if I pull this arm in, it means that the neck part of the guitar is going to go out, away from me. Okay? Got that so far? So I'm pivoting around the middle of my body as I pull my strumming arm inward. I'm exaggerating this, by the way. Don't mimic this, movement per movement. It's a very subtle thing. Pulling back, allowing the neck to basically come forward, and then I can counteract that by grabbing the neck, so to speak, and pulling back. The whole time the center of my body is pushing right here. Again, very subtle. This is like the motion of a teeter-totter, back and forth. And that allows me to apply pressure onto the strings this way, as I also apply pressure on my arm that way, and I'm really grasping the guitar with the bigger muscles of my body, not just the muscles of my arm. And that too contributes to being able to make a bar chord come out very cleanly. And I think sometimes, I mean, the truth is, people come to that realization physically without even really realizing they're doing it. It's just evolved in them over time to the point that some people don't even understand why you can't make a bar chord. Well, they haven't dissected sort of all the forces that are at play. So thumb position, important. Gravity, important. Sort of this teeter-totter effect where I'm kind of pushing this portion of the guitar with my torso, but pulling back with both arms. Again, not exaggerating this. It's a very subtle thing. Engages a lot of the bigger muscles, and it saves you from having aches and pains and crampiness in here. And that's how the B minor is going to be primarily activated. So, hope that helps. A little coverage on B7. Get the second and the pinky down at the same time. Train your hand to do that, and then drop the remaining guys. Ultimately, you want them all to come in at once. Any bar chord will benefit from good thumb placement, good relaxation in the arm to let some weight help push those strings down, and then this more subtle effect that I'm talking about. Using the bigger muscles of the upper body to kind of engage the guitar. I'll use the word clamp, but that's a bit too extreme, but I'm clamping the guitar using my upper body, and that helps really solidify the pressure onto the strings. So hopefully that gives you some sense of how you might handle those guys, and of course you got to get at it and get at it. So there we go, a little review on B7 and B minor, two chords that I find troublesome for a lot of recreational players who are sort of working their way out from the basic keys they've been used to, C and G and D, working into other styles, in fact. On top of all those features that I just discussed, of course, you could have elements of the guitar that are giving you grief. Perhaps the height of the string, if you can see that, the height of the string from the fretboard is too high, the action is too high. That makes it very hard to grab these structures and any chord in general, so you'd want to have that evaluated. You want to make sure the guitar is not fighting you in that case. The other feature is that sometimes it's just better to go to a lower gauge string, a lighter gauge string, which will make the strings easier to push. A third option would be to, in fact, totally get rid of all these steel strings and put on some silk and steel. They're much softer. You do lose some volume, some sustain, but it's better than nothing, and it would be a nice stepping stone to help train the hand to get to the full steel sound. Silk and steel is a combination of nylon wrapped in steel and regular steel strings for the higher 3 strings. So the wrapped ones down here are nylon in the core, whereas in a steel string guitar they're metal in the core. Yep, that feature will also make sure that you're going to be doing good, especially bar chords. And finally, of course, I do this a lot. I'll always recommend to people, why don't you just start to play your bar chords on an electric guitar? Everyone who's ever held one knows that the ability to manipulate the strings is so much easier. The beast was built for speed and for string manipulation, such that the tension on the strings of an electric are much less, because they're not, in a sense, producing the actual sound that you hear, unlike the acoustic guitar. So hopefully that helps. Dig into those two forms, practice them often, as with anything, and keep at it gently, because you don't want to hurt yourself. People do get weirdness going on in their wrists and in their crampy hands as they practice these things. You don't want to create pain in your practice, and you certainly don't want to play with pain. All right, Dempster Guitar Studio, Steve Dempster here. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for hanging out. Bye.